Hello everyone, this is part 12 of What If Naruto Passed the Genin test, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. It was bright. The stream of light blaring down from the large incandescent lamps over the small table put out almost as much heat as they did light. But it was necessary for the men under them to be working in this condition, because one minor mistake and the whole operation could fail. There were 3 of them, the men in white coats, all huddled around a small raised table in the large white room. Their hair was wrapped up in plastic netting and they wore textured latex gloves to avoid contaminating anything, as well as to provide some extra grip on the tools in their hands. All around the 3 were machines and instruments of every shape and size, performing dozens of different tasks and monitoring every aspect of the young girl lying on the operating table before them. Okay, said one of them as sweat beaded on his brow, let's finish this up now. Hajime, make sure to graft the tissue as carefully as you possibly can. Aosho, help me seal the windpipe. Minutes ticked by as the men set about their work. Once or twice someone would gasp, but by some stroke of luck or by the skill of his partner, disaster was avoided. Nearly half an hour later, it was finished and the anesthetized girl was carefully placed on a gurney and wheeled out of the room. Well done, gentlemen, said one of the surgeons as he took off his mask. The other 2 did the same and began to congratulate one another on the success. Well done indeed, said an old man in a funny triangular hat as he walked into the room smiling. Hokage-sama, the 3 surgeons said in unison, giving a respectfully low bow. I'm impressed, said Sarutobi, I was told that operation only has a 1 in 100 success rate. The tallest of the doctors nodded, yes sir, that's correct, but things went off without a hitch today. Honestly, it's like fate just wanted us to succeed. I'm glad it did, said the Hokage. How long until she wakes up? We're going to keep her under anesthesia for a while depending on how she does, so anywhere between 3 days to a week. Why so long? Well, the head surgeon began, we just built her a new windpipe and 2 major blood vessels that lead to and away from the brain. Her body may be as good as new, but it needs to adjust to the new tissue. Waking up too soon would be a potentially hazardous shock. I see, said Sarutobi, but nonetheless, wonderful job. The 3 bowed again as Sarutobi turned to walk out and down the hall. He retraced the path of the gurney perfectly to a wing devoted to recovery rooms for trauma patients. He began scanning through the windows and seeing all manner of ninjas, recovering from a broad range of injuries. Most of them he knew personally, simply because all but a few were ninjas whom he had assigned to particularly treacherous missions. He knew where they had gone when they were hurt and how they were attacked because he knew the dangers of the excursion. There are days I wonder about this profession, he thought in the back of his mind, if it's really worth it to send my people on missions where I know good and well that their like is not to come back maimed or CS pled, or not at all. He hated knowing that he was the one to make the call to tear families apart, to separate husbands from wives forever, and shatter friendships that had been established in the tender years of childhood, but it was necessary, or at least that's what he told himself so he could sleep at night. He came to the window he'd been seeking and peered in at the sleeping figure on the bed. The pink hair was AS giveaway, as was the prominent forehead, both were trademarks of both sides of her family. He grimaced when he saw the bandages wrapped around her and all of the machines required to monitor her condition in case anything should go wrong. It was like looking at a priceless portrait that had been ruined. The price of being a ninja. SC. Night was quickly approaching and the setting sun was casting a bloody glow through the hazy mist that had engulfed Hajime since the massive storm broke earlier that day, but within the depths of one of the massive barges floating downstream from the Great Bridge, the only light came from a single shaded lantern. As the tide tossed mildly, the barge rocked only enough to swing the lantern gently from side to side, though the shifting light was casting eerie shadows from the bed in the corner, and from the short figure standing beside it. Slowly the covers on the bed began to shift and rise as a monstrous figure sat up and looked around the vast empty room. How are you feeling, Zabuza-san? Asked Haku from beside the bed. Zabuza rolled his N and snapped his jaw shut with a loud report. Better and stronger than ever, said the mercenary as he got out of bed and readjusted his trousers. If I didn't know better, I'd never guess Kakashi had cut me open like that. Haku smiled. Well, that's good. I suppose that means the medicine Tobi-sama is doing its job then. Zabuza nodded. That was one hell of a steroid. I feel like I could take on a demon. You probably could have anyway, chuckled Haku, and now that you've got that special blend in you, there'll be no stopping you tonight. What's tonight? Haku faltered for a moment, then began. Tobi-sama ordered Goto-san to complete the mission before midnight tonight, or else there would be the devil to pay, so we've got a little less than 4 hours to kill Tazuna and capture that Uzumaki kid for the Akatsuki. Zabuza began to laugh quietly. Should be fun, he said after a moment, but if we want to get this done good and quick, then we'll have to try a different approach. What did you have in mind? Simple enough, I'll take Tazuna and his lapdog Kakashi, while you handle those Genin. As soon as you're done with them, you can help me with that Genin and together we'll overwhelm him. Haku nodded. I can do that, though I'd rather not kill the children. They're too young, don't you think? Zabuza mentally groaned, but shook it off. Your heart is too big, but I guess that's just who you are. Fine, just make sure they don't interfere and incapacitate the brat Goto once so he doesn't run away. Now, let's get started, bring me my sword. Haku grinned and walked off into the gloom of the deck, returning shortly carrying Zabuza's massive weapon. Just be careful, said Haku as he handed Zabuza the end splitter with relative ease. We wouldn't want anything happening to that perfect body of yours. SC. Construction on the bridge had been cancelled for the day in lieu of a mass funeral being put on for the men who SD in the attack. The entire village was in attendance, along with numerous men and women who had made the trip to Hajike from the surrounding area to volunteer, only to find the scene of sorrow that awaited them. Tazuna got up in front of a podium, stood on a makeshift platform in front of a massive funeral pyre, and began to deliver a eulogy for those who chose to rest rather than live oppressed in the shadow of tyranny. He conveyed a message of hope and freedom, to which the assembled crowds cheered and hollered out in approval, before he stepped down and took a torch from Kakashi, who was standing nearby. The old man took a step back and tossed the flaming brand on the second tier of the leveled pyre. Almost immediately the wood took the flame and began to shine as the fire spread quickly and engulfed everything in its path. Ino, Naruto, and Sasuke stood silently in the back of the gathering, watching the pyre glow and crackle. The blondes were holding hands and standing close together while Sasuke leaned with his back against and rotting tree with his eyes closed. Sasuke, asked Naruto. The raven-haired boy opened his eyes and glared at Naruto. Are you all right? Sasuke just grimaced and looked off into the distance, leaving Naruto bewildered and curious. What's the matter? Did something happen to your eyes? Asked the boy in orange, only then noticing the reddish tint that had come over the other boy's eyes. Nothing, muttered Sasuke, they've just been burning for a while, and having that giant pyre over there isn't helping any. I'm sorry, Ino said softly, anything we can do? Sasuke turned on him with an icy stare. You can leave me the hell alone. His voice was quiet, but unmistakably hostile. What's your problem? Growled Naruto, stepping in front of Ino. She was just trying to be nice. Sasuke took a step forward, with his hands at his sides, and Naruto involuntarily braced himself. There was a quick rush of air and Kakashi materialized in between the two genin with his ever-present book in his hand. Is there a problem here? Asked the Genin in a whisper. It is after all exceedingly rude to act this way at a funeral. Naruto and Sasuke took a step back, but neither relaxed or took their eyes off one another. Kakashi shifted his glance between the two of them. What's the matter with you? He asked suspiciously. The two of you were fine just yesterday, but now you look like you're ready to come to blows. Why not tell Naruto to shut up and mind his own business? Growled Sasuke. Sasuke, I know it was a hard morning, but the least you could do is show some respect, whispered Kakashi before Naruto could respond. Respect, muttered Sasuke, maybe you should show some respect to the and put that smut you always read away. Kakashi's eye narrowed. He'd never seen Sasuke act this rebelliously before. Perhaps you're right, said the Genin as he tucked the book into his vest, but now that I've done my part, why don't you show some respect both to the and to your team? I will, said Sasuke, when they give me the same courtesy. Ino piped up, I just wanted to know if there was anything Naruto and I could do to help you. I thought that was being very courteous. Maybe you should learn to keep your nose out of other people's business, sneered the Uchiha. I thought you'd know that was just common courtesy. Sasuke, murmured Naruto, why are you such a jerk all of a sudden? This isn't like you at all. Sasuke was silent, and Kakashi moved to stand completely between the two boys. That's enough, Sasuke, I don't know what's gotten into you and I don't care. We'll talk about it later, but for now, since the ceremony is winding down, we need to just escort Tazuna back to the bridge so he can do some preliminary evaluating. Understood. Naruto, Sasuke, and Ino all nodded, and the tension between them seemed to diffuse just a little as Kakashi turned and led them up to the front of the crowd where Tazuna was speaking to a group of 3 or 4 young men in ratty clothes. Tazuna-san, said Kakashi above the conversation. The old man turned around, waving the men off, and asked Kakashi if he and his squad were ready to go. We're ready whenever you are, said the Kopinin, but are you sure this is completely necessary? You going back this soon without any workmen? Tazuna nodded. Yes, Kakashi, as inconvenient as it may be, I'm afraid it's completely necessary. One of the engineers on the southern edge reported a possible fault in one of the piles. Before I can let anyone back on, we need to go down and assess just how bad it is. What are the odds of it being really bad? Asked Naruto. Odds are, said Tazuna, that it's nothing, just a crack in the layer of waterproof tar tile which can easily be repaired. If it's something more serious though, then it could endanger the whole project if we continue without addressing it. Perhaps it's best if we go now then, said Kakashi as he eyed Naruto and Sasuke, hoping that something to do would keep them from fighting. Agreed, said Tazuna. The walk to the bridge was but uneventful and tense. Kakashi walked between Naruto and Sasuke in front, while Ino followed close behind Tazuna and brought up the rear. Despite the encroaching dark, they all made it to the bridge in good time and set about crossing the platform to the point where Tazuna said the fault should have been. Sure enough, right at the base of one of the piles anchorings atop the platform, there was a crack about as thin as a finger stretching on for about 3 feet before it ended abruptly at the top of the anchoring. Well, said Tazuna with a smile, this doesn't look too bad at all. A little ugly to be sure, but I think we can take care of this in just a few minutes if you 4 would be willing to help. We'd be happy to, said Kakashi, putting his hands on the boy's shoulders, so it's not too serious then. Not at all, said the old man, it's just a crack in the top layer. Easy to fill up with a little packing mud, I suppose. Naruto, could you get me that bucket over there, the one with the spatula-looking thing sitting on top? Naruto walked over to the one Tazuna was pointing at and took hold of the bucket's handle and pulled up. Amazingly, he stumbled under the weight and struggled to haul it over to Tazuna, eliciting a grin from Ino and a good-humored joke from Kakashi. Thanks, my boy, said Tazuna, plastering an obviously fake smile across his face as he popped the lid and took a hold of the miniature shovel. Now can any of you do something to heat this stuff up? It's hard as a rock right now and I'd have hell trying to just scoop it out by hand. Sasuke stepped up and performed a few quick seals. I can do that, he mumbled. Without pressing his fingers to his mouth, he tightened his lips and blew a stream of searing air on the hard putty. After a moment, the grey pitch had shifted to a reddish-brown muck and become gelatinous. That's enough, said Tazuna abruptly. Sasuke stopped and stepped back as the old man scooped up a few pounds of the goopy material and slung it against the crack with all the finesse of a drunken lumberjack. Tazuna set to work at smearing the stuff in and working it into every pore of the stone. The 4 ninjas simply watched, wondering why the old man simply couldn't have some workmen set about the task instead of having to do it himself. I think Tazuna-san just likes being out here, whispered Ino to Naruto. The blonde in orange chuckled a little and Kakashi shook his head, stiffening a grin himself. I agree, whispered the copy nin, but then again I think being away from that funeral is lightening everyone's spirit. Naruto looked over and smiled. I guess, even Sasuke doesn't look quite so down anymore. The raven-haired boy glanced over at Naruto without really making eye contact. He just crossed his arms and kicked at the ground for a second, before looking up. Naruto, I'm sorry about earlier, said the Genin, just about knocking the Uzumaki over. You to Ino, I just kinda snapped. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Well, thought the Junin, that was a nice little surprise. Maybe Naruto will actually be courteous in return for a change. Naruto made a quick recovery before anyone could say anything and quickly regained his balance. Nah, It's okay, duck butt, we forgive you, he playfully prodded, but don't think that means I'm gonna let it happen again. Or maybe not, groused Kakashi as he reached up and covered his face. Much to everyone's shock, Sasuke actually cracked a grin. The Uchiha boy flipped some hair out of his face and glanced between the three other ninja. Fine, he said, just try and. Quiet, said Kakashi calmly. The Genin and Tazuna all looked at the copy nin who had moved a little off to the group's right. He was staring over the edge of the bridge and glancing warily from side to side. You three group around Tazuna-san and keep him, and yourselves safe no matter what, he said, completely composed. The three Genin quickly formed a triangle around Tazuna with Naruto at the head, Sasuke on the man's left, and Ino on his right. What's going on? Asked Ino nervously as Sasuke pulled out a few shuriken and Naruto drew his swords. Kakashi turned to face them. He pulled up his forehead protector embossed with the leaf, revealing his blood-red sharingan, the three tomo marks opening like a new set of eyes. Almost immediately a wall of mist began to rise up from the sea and completely envelop the bridge. The vapor hung in the air and began to darken like smoke, until nearly all visibility was lost in the gloom. Naruto looked around him and could barely see Tazuna and his teammates, much less Kakashi. Zabuza's back, said the Junin. Even as the words rolled off of the Junin's lips, a maniacal laugh began to radiate throughout the gloom and seemed to chill the already cold and moist air. It was indeed Zabuza. Tazuna-san, said Naruto, how soon could we expect some kind of reinforcements? Tazuna shook his head and looked down. Never at best, he murmured, I told everyone to just stay back until I confirmed the fault was nothing serious. Probably a good thing, laughed a deep voice, seemingly from dozens of points all around at once, anyone who came to help would just end up getting in your way. And once you five were I'd just have to K them too. Kakashi rolled his shoulders, throwing up a facade of indifference. You can always just surrender and let us go on our way, said the copy nin. After all, we both know you're no match for me. All around the laughter boomed again as a form began to take on shape in the dark haze. The figure was no shorter than 6 feet tall and carried a sword just as large. Immediately the whole group tensed and readied for a fight, and the figure twirled its sword around playfully. The concrete at Kakashi's feet shattered under the sudden and explosive pressure of his stride. The Junin drew out a kunai and flew faster than any arrow straight at Zabuza and they both disappeared into the mist. The clang of stele on stele rang through the air as the two ninjas dueled. For what seemed like an eternity the two clashed, the sounds and bellows of battle growing fainter as they faded into the distance. Naruto and Sasuke glanced at each other and agreed by unspoken consent, then they turned to Ino. I'll watch after Tazuna, she said, go help Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke and Naruto rushed, shoulder to shoulder towards the sounds, Naruto twirling his blades in anticipation of the conflict. Stop! Shouted the raven-haired boy abruptly. The two genin screeched to a halt, their sandals skidding on the bridge as a straight row of needles thudded into the ground directly in front of them with a series of soft thumps, just as a nin in flowing blue robes and a white mask dropped out of the mist before them. Long black hair seemed to flow from the edges of the disguise and blow in the light wind. I'm afraid that I can't let you interfere with their battle, said the nin in a strangely gender-neutral voice, you'll have to contend with me. We'll see, shouted Naruto, charging straight in twirling his swords as Sasuke performed a series of seals. Without missing a beat, the strange nin leapt up and twisted in midair. Naruto gasped as the back of his collar suddenly caught in the attacker's iron grasp and he was slung into Sasuke like a battering ram before the Uchiha could react. As the nin in blue landed gracefully, several yards away from the crumpled genin, the two boys lay in a heap. How do you like Haku's Rengoku no Jutsu? Asked Zabuza's voice from the mist all around Kakashi. Is it thick enough for you? The copy nin glanced measuredly all around, futilely scanning the gloom with his sharingan. Even the powers of the Uchiha bloodline did him no good, the chakra-infused mist masked the missing nin completely. All Kakashi could see when examined the area was a faintly neon blue cloud that obscured all sources of chakra within it, leaving the Junin to rely completely on his hearing. I'm not quite sure I could cut it, began Kakashi before he whirled around to parry the massive sword swung at him from behind. The Junin deflected it with ease and slashed at the source, but cut nothing but the air as the sword liquefied collapsed in a puddle. I'm not sure I could cut it with a knife, said Kakashi, but you'll have to compliment your friend on having a knack for covering your ass. Oh, asked Zabuza, how do you mean? Well, let's face it, if this Haku person hadn't saved you a few days ago, I would have ked you then. Now if it weren't for this mist, I'd be sing you now. Perhaps, but whatever works, said Zabuza with a serpentine calm in his voice. Another series of clashes and clangs emanated from the mist as 6 tall figures all attacked Kakashi at once. He dispatched them quickly and each one immediately collapsed in a puddle on the bridge. Coward, growled Kakashi, these clones are barely a fraction of what you can really do. Why not come out and fight me yourself? Why don't you come and get me? Fine, thought Kakashi, if you want me to bring the fight to you then why not? The copy nin put his hands quietly together and molded just a bit of chakra. Holding his breath to keep silent, the copy nin tried to decide how many shadow clones would be enough to throw Zabuza off guard. 2 would be far too few, but it wouldn't take much chakra, which would be important for the Chidori since he'd only get 1 shot. 10 or 15 would probably do it, but might eat into the energy needed to finish the fight, depending on how long it took to track Zabuza down. Track. It was an epiphany. The copy nin couldn't believe he hadn't thought of it sooner as he uncrossed his fingers and reached slowly around into his vest. The quiet rustling was the only sound he made as he pulled out the small scrolls. What are you doing, Kakashi? Asked Zabuza. What do you have written on that scroll? Impossible. How did he know it was a scroll, or does he? Is he just taking a shot in the dark, or can he really see what I'm doing? Nothing of consequence, mumbled Kakashi as he slowly and silently unfurled the scroll and cut a small gash in his thumb. No sooner had the blood appeared than the metallic smell pervaded the mist and spread the scent throughout the whole area. Instantly, no less than 30 shapes took on Zabuza's form in the mist and leapt at Kakashi. The copy nin slammed the scrolls on the ground and spun, simultaneously sweeping a trail of blood across the scrolls and filling the air with a massive volley of shuriken, every last one in the Junin's pouch, that hacked the water clones to pieces. Kakashi threw his hand down on the scrolls and pumped the pre-stored chakra into the paper, creating a cloud of white smoke with a bang. Nothing happened. A bead of sweat began to form on the Junin's brow, and he slapped the scroll a few more times as if he expected something else to happen. He muttered aloud, that was a waste. Indeed it was, rumbled Zabuza's voice as his shape appeared in the gloom not 10 feet from Kakashi. What do you plan to do now? That depends on whether or not you're the real version, said the copy nin as he stood up. Zabuza laughed. Well, I make no promises, but I think I'm the real me, and I think I'd know. In a flash, the missing nin disappeared. What? Was all Kakashi could manage to think before Zabuza materialized from the mist directly behind him. There was an almost imperceptible glint of light from the edge of the massive sword as it swung through the air with soundless speed and made its way straight towards Kakashi's en. The Junin felt a cold edge against his skin, and by the time Kakashi had time to turn his head it was already rolling off of his shoulders. His vision spun and began to go black, though he could watch as his own body began to crumple and collapse, useless in its truncated state. The nin's body fell to the ground with a solid thump and retched once, then again as the head rolled to Zabuza's feet. Zabuza began to laugh as blood spasmed from the severed end since the heart beat erratically, and by the time the flow of blood slowed to a trickle when the heart stopped beating and only gravity was left to draw it out, the missing nin was bellowing victoriously. He slammed his sword into the ground when he saw the decapitated head's glazing eyes flit aimlessly in the skull, trying to locate something. What he didn't realize was when the head's lips began to smile just as the eyes closed. There was a brilliant flash as the headless body blazed as bright as the sun in the dark, throwing the missing nin off guard. The head disappeared in a puff of smoke, and from the new cloud leapt a brown mutt that clamped onto a blinded Zabuza's arm with ferocious jaws. Within a second the ground around Zabuza exploded up and a dozen dogs, some large, some small, but all ferocious bit into Zabuza and essentially pinned him down. Struggle as he might, he didn't break the dog's grips, he was firmly rooted down. Show yourself, you goddamn coward! The nin shouted angrily into the mist. The flash in the mist drew Haku's attention away from the 2 genin before him just long enough. A badly bleeding Naruto performed a quick series of seals in unison with Sasuke, and together the 2 unleashed a massive wall of flame that sped towards the hunter nin. Haku, however, was not one to be caught in an attack that forward and sped to the side, even as the fire blazed by where the nin had stood only milliseconds before. The nin in blue spun and flung out a single needle, impacting a Naruto clone in the forehead, banishing the summon with a puff of white smoke. The shuriken Sasuke threw met a very different fate when Haku plucked them out of the air with his bare hands and hurled them back at the Uchiha, grazing his claves and dropping him to the ground. B! Shouted Naruto, pressing his fingers together, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Dozens of clones leapt into existence and rushed at Haku. Each of them was ready to do whatever it took put an end to the nin in blue, but not one of them was ready for what happened next. Haku charged straight at them and dove into their midst. The counterfeit hunter had a trio of needles protruding from in between each finger, making for 9 in each hand, and slammed his spiked fists into 2 of the clones with blinding speed, destroying them, even as he spun and flung out the sly spikes. Each needle made its way into a clone with pinpoint accuracy, but as those vanished in puffs of smoke, Naruto sent in another wave of clones. Haku destroyed those but Naruto had yet a third ready to send into the fray. I can do this all day, little boy, said Haku calmly, can you? I'm sure you'll run out of chakra eventually. Not hardly, Naruto said with a laugh as he formed the shadow seal again and spawned another wave of 20 copies. I've got more chakra than you could ever dream of having. The faint red glow around the Uzumaki's fingers was a testament to that. How much more do you have? Asked Sasuke as he crouched beside Naruto. Naruto just glanced down and smiled. Plenty. Despite a seemingly inhuman level of SK, Haku quickly began to bow under the barrage of shadow clones. It seemed like for every 1s, 3 more would spring to take its place. No matter what the nin tried, Haku was completely surrounded. Haku! Shouted Zabuza from off in the distance, finish this now. The hunter nin barely glanced over and instantly knew what Zabuza wanted, and jumped into the air, spinning around and unleashing a cloud of needles, sacrificing accuracy as well as almost every needle left in the arsenal to buy just a duo of seconds to perform the necessary hand seals. What's going on? Asked Naruto nervously as the black mist began to ascend skyward, leaving the battleground mostly clear. No idea, said Sasuke. As Haku completed the final seal, the mist all around began to condense in midair and congeal into what looked like solid sheets of ice. All in all, 100 or so of the translucent and highly reflective sheets appeared in a great dome with the 2 Genin in its center and stretching out to encompass almost half of the massive bridge, before Haku had even reached the zenith of the jump. The hunter nin back flipped towards one of the sheets, but instead of colliding with it, merely passed through it, or into it. The Genin couldn't tell which, but all they could see was that once Haku made contact with one of the mirrors, the nin suddenly appeared on the surface of every single on in a 2D image. This is bad, Naruto gulped. Ha ha, bellowed Zabuza as soon as he saw just where everyone was standing. He wrenched his arms upwards, breaking loose of Kakashi's trap and sending the hounds flying in all directions. The missing nin vanished, even as Kakashi shot forward with a kunai in hand to finish the fight, and reappeared on the other side of the dome. He stood directly behind Tazuna and Ino. The old man and the girl turned to see the monstrous figure looming over them with his giant sword in hand. You're going to do just as I say, growled Zabuza in a low pitch. The hell we are, yelled Ino as she exploded forward and slugged Zabuza square in the gut. Her hand connected to his iron-hard abs with a painful thunk, and the monster of a man began to chuckle as the undeterred Ino punched him again with her undamaged hand. You're outclassed, little girl, laughed Zabuza as he caught her arm and twisted, driving her to her knees. One of your village's finest barely managed to survive me. The kunoiki, refusing to give up, drew out a kunai even as Zabuza snapped her wrist like a toothpick, and whirled around, further coiling her broken wrist, but propelling the blade in between 2 ribs on his left side. Zabuza screamed and stumbled back, clutching his bleeding wound. Ino faltered, dizzy with pain and fear, but threw the knife with all the strength she could muster, burying it firmly in Zabuza's right bicep and causing him to drop the end splitter. Dirty little bee, shouted the missing nin as he lurched forward and drove his fist into Ino's cheek. The girl rocketed to the ground only to have her rib cage nearly crushed in as Zabuza ferociously stomped on her. Even then, Ino grabbed hold of Zabuza's boot and held on tight. Maybe I can hold him long enough for Naruto to get here, she thought as the pounding in her head intensified while Zabuza's free foot solidly connected with skull. Let her go, said Kakashi as he arrived and stood a few yards in front of Zabuza. As if, laughed the missing nin, Haku wanted me to let you and the others go after we killed Tazuna and took the Uzumaki brat. But not now, no, now you've really pissed me off. You're all going to S and I'm going to make you watch your kiddie SS suffer. He pulled a long knife out of his baggy pants and held it down to Ino. If you make one move towards me, the old man, or go inside that dome, this little BSS a painful death. Ino, shouted Naruto as he saw Zabuza kick the girl off his leg and hold her up as a shield. Kakashi-sensei, do something. Naruto, said Sasuke hesitantly as he looked all around, we should concentrate on one problem at a time, starting with how we're going to take care of this nuisance. Let Kakashi-sensei handle the rest. But Naruto shouted as a needle buried itself in his shoulder. The two genin looked up to see each image of Haku had reached out of its mirror and was holding a perfectly clear needle made of solid ice. This is bad, muttered Sasuke. Naruto didn't have time to respond as the Hakus all threw their needles with inhuman speed, and replaced them even before the missiles had found time to make their marks in the genin. Kit, growled Kyubi from his mental cage. I can give you all the energy you need, but you have to be the one to use it, so use it. Just keep it coming, you stupid fox. Naruto pressed his fingers together and formed a wave of 50 snarling clones, that all leapt up at the mirrors, but immediately met a painful fate, as hundreds of needles passed right through them and continued on towards the genin. Sasuke gulped down a breath of air and shot out a stream of fire, melting most of the missiles heading for them, but leaving the mirrors unfazed. Naruto twirled around with the wakizashi and managed to pick the remaining ones out of the air. Try that again, said Sasuke after the next wave. Okay, muttered Naruto, creating more clones. As the copies all jumped out to attack the mirrors, Sasuke sucked in a breath and again spit out the fire, this time in a much thinner and more concentrated stream. In midair while the copies were disappearing in puffs of smoke, the jet of flame suddenly sparked, like it had found something to burn, before it continued on and set into one of the mirrors, leaving a small black hole through it. Niece, said Naruto with an almost feral grin, if you can do that a few thousand times we might just take out one of them. Sasuke grinned. I can see it. See what? Look, said the Uchiha, at the lower left corners of the reflections robes. They're singed off, muttered Naruto. I can see it right before that Haku character moves. It's fast, but I can see it. There's only one moving between all the mirrors super fast. Even now there's only one even though it just looks like there's one in each mirror. If your clones are any distraction at all, I might be able to end this. Sounds like a plan, said Naruto, not waiting any longer, but sending out another volley of the clones. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.